Hi, John. I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. A real pleasure to be here with you in Cannes. Thanks so much for taking the time.
My pleasure.
Huge congrats on Heads or Tails.
Thank you.
When the prospect was put to you of playing Buffalo Bill, this sort of legendary but very mythologized kind of character, what was really appealing to you?
Well, yeah, it was a big ask. You know, someone to Americans, it's someone that's like, I suppose to the whole world, because Buffalo Bill was the most famous American in the world from like the late 1890s, the early 1900s. So yeah, the pressure was on there. And then you're also thinking like, well, do I really tell the truth about this man himself, what he was actually like? Or are we trying to portray the myth of Buffalo Bill? And it's kind of both in this movie. Like you see his flaws as a human being a little bit, but he's also very much like a P.T. Barnum sort of character, selling the myth of America, telling people like, you know, spreading the message of the American freedom, you know, idea. That you can liberate yourself no matter what station in life you come from. You can rise up and become who you really want to be, which of course is a really appealing message for the main character, Rosa, played by Nadia. And that sets the whole action of the movie into motion. Yeah, Buffalo Bill were some big boots to fill, but I knew it would also be a lot of fun. He's such a like playful character, you know, like he's someone he was a showman. So it's always fun to play a showman.
Yeah, was it quite fun to kind of lean into not only kind of humanizing him, but also finding that tone and this kind of irony that you bring to the character?
Yeah, we kept talking a lot about Walter Houston, you know, like especially in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, the great film that all of us loved. Walter Houston was John Huston's father, and he had this great kind of delivery and this kind of folksy American charm. He was just always kind of spinning tales the way he talked. And so we decided to kind of focus on that for the way that Bill spoke in this movie, because who knows what he was really like. You know, at this point, 10 years go by, you can't tell what the truth is about someone anymore. But that is something that I tempered the character with, was not only that we kind of kept talking about the onstage character of Bill and the offstage character of Bill. So on stage, he's like selling these big ideas and very much like a P.T. Barnum kind of Circus Barker kind of person. And then behind the scenes, like, but yeah, listen, like it's really like this, you know, like he's much more practical. And that was true of Bill. You know, his father was an abolitionist who was killed for speaking against slavery. His mother was a suffragette who was fighting for the women's right to vote at a time when that was very new, you know. So Bill actually came from a progressive background. And he actually fought in the Indian Wars, and he was a Pony Express rider, and he worked, you know, he was a scout for General Custer. Like, he knew the reality of what the relationship with the Native Americans was. But he could see that what audiences wanted to hear was something different. They wanted to hear this heroic version of themselves, and it was very appealing. And he was like a genius with publicity in that way. He could tell what people wanted to hear about themselves. But what's interesting about him is that he himself actually knew the truth. He wasn't deluded himself about what really happened during the war. He knew, he was there. But he just decided to, you know, it was so appealing, this myth of the West, that it's kind of incredible that one man almost single-handedly created all of these tropes and these cliches that we have in the Westerns, in film especially. It all started with Bill, yeah.
In terms of the sort of the physicality of the character as well, you know, the beard, and I believe you sort of had a lot of say in, you know, like what he was wearing, the suits and things like that. How important is that to you, I guess, in terms of your performance? Because obviously you have to think about the interiority of the character, but maybe the clothes you're wearing, the look that you have also helps you find that.
Yeah, I mean, for a showman, like your show costume is very important. And we had two different looks for the character too, you know, what he wears during the Wild West show, and then this kind of like day-to-day look, which also had a cape and all this stuff. But yeah, that, you know, the clothes make the man in a certain way, they say, and Bill definitely was aware of appearances and wanting to appear like this larger than life character all the time. Yeah, and you know, when you work in Italy, that's the thing, the costumes are incredible, always. Like there's such a deep level of craftsmanship in Italy for hats and for clothing. So I loved interacting with everyone. There's a famous hat maker in Rome called Pironi that made my hat. That I got to visit their workshop, and I mean, I collect hats and I love hats. So it was really an honor to get to see, like, that place has been there for probably 100 years, like multiple generations of the same family. So, yeah, clothes is always a fun part of working in Italy for sure.
And collaborating with Italian directors as well. I mean, did that bring another layer to things? How confident were you with your Italian? But also, I guess, having
well, luckily
maybe
the directors speak English very well, so I didn't have to really rely on Italian to speak to them. But it's always a joy to work in Italy. You know, it's such a beautiful place. The people are so lovely. The food is incredible. The history all around you, you know, it's a miracle when you get to work there. So if people knew how easy it was to get me in a movie in France or Italy or Ireland for that matter, all these places, like, you're already 50% the way there when they ask you if it takes place in a place like Italy. So, yeah, these guys also, their first movie, The Tale of King Crab, was just brilliant, original, wild movie. And they're very into like folk tales and myths and these kind of stories that humans tell themselves. But I'm really into that too. So we had a common ground with that, and we just really hit it off, the three of us. We had this amazing kind of creative triangle between the three of us, working on the dialogue and trying to understand like what we were trying to convey in the film throughout.
And I guess it was also bringing a European perspective to this very American story. So did that kind of change the way you thought of it as well?
Yeah, I always wondered, like, where the hell did the spaghetti Western come from? Like, how is it that suddenly they started making Westerns in Italy? And I never understood it other than like, oh, they must have just liked cowboys, you know? Like, now when I studied what Bill did, it was really Buffalo Bill. He brought that show 4 or 5 times to Italy. They started writing little dime store novels that little boys started reading, little boys and girls, and these sort of, you know, mythic stories started to spread. And then all those kids grew up and became filmmakers in the 50s and 60s. And there you go. There's the spaghetti Western. Like, but it all began with these like goodwill tours that Bill would make with this Wild West show.
And in terms of the takeaways from the film, I mean, right there in the title, you know, dealing with this idea of fate. But I love the fact that it almost like sets up the classic hero of the cowboy and then slowly sort of deconstructs that to then reveal, really, this is Rosa's story, and she sort of emerges as the heroine.
Yeah, I think that's something really wonderfully subversive about the film too. It's like the film is very much set in this patriarchal age, you know, late 1890s. Like, men were in control of everything, women were still fighting for the right to vote, and that was something that was really fun for me to do, was to turn this character into a vessel for Rosa's emancipation. He like inspires her to emancipate herself, to break free of this patriarchy that she's in. And it's pretty funny that a patriarchal character like Bill is the one that inspiring her to do that. Yeah, I think no one wants to see another boring Western with the same old, like, you know, cliche story points. So I thought it was really clever the way they used myths of the Western and applied them to this woman's story of liberation.
And obviously you're no stranger to Cannes, having been on the jury here. What is it like to be back? Why do you think this festival is so special?
Well, it's always a dream to come back here. I've been coming here since I was, a long time, let's just say. And the last time I was here was on the jury, I was the president of in certain regards. So I was like on the inside of the festival for once. That was really interesting. But this is the coolest place in the world for film. And the last time I was here 2 years ago, I was really feeling like are movies even going to make it? You know, is cinema over? Like, and then I watched all these incredible films here at the festival, and you realize like this place is keeping cinema alive. You know, these audiences, the appreciation, the importance given to filmmaking, and yeah, so it ain't dead yet. I'm happy to report.
And you've got to tell me about this Mr. Romance project. Sounds like it's something that's very personal to you, a lot of fun. There's music to go with it. Tell us why that's so
yeah, I got, you know, after doing a lot of projects for other people, I decided like I always wanted to go back to that character, Mr. Cellophane, that I played in Chicago, the musical, years ago. And so I developed this vaudeville show called Mr. Romantic that's singing and dancing and goofing around, and it's this sort of mythic character. And yeah, so we have an album coming out in June, and we're starting to take it around. It's almost like it's like an empathic vaudeville show or an emotional magic act or something. Like,
And I guess at this point in your career, you really can choose your projects. What does make you want to become attached to something? Are there any itches left to scratch? Something you've never tried before? Someone you haven't worked with?
in the case of Mr. Romantic, it was like, what can I do for the world? Like this, there seems to be a real, lack of empathy in the world, and there's all this conflict. And what can I do besides carrying, a picket sign or something? So I decided I can sing songs. I can tell people I love them. I can make them laugh. So that's what the show was born from. What attracts me to a project this day is usually something I haven't done before, or a challenge, or something that makes you nervous to do, like getting to be Buffalo Bill Cody. That was it's a lot to take on, but it was such a joyful experience too.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all that with me.
Yeah,
Huge
my
congrats on
pleasure.
the movie, and
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed being back here in Cannes.
Yeah, my pleasure.